to Nature's Field Trips. We are talking about migration. We're trying to keep all of our topics right now very connected with what's going on in nature, and so we just had our winter really get going. Snow is on the ground, and so a lot of animals have recently migrated. So we're going to talk about the different types of migration that there are and kind of how they do this. So let's first go into these types really quick. There is complete, partial, altitudinal, and removal migration. So complete migration would be when every single animal in a given species migrates. Not necessarily together, right, because there are different groups that they're going to be migrating with, but every single animal in a group is going to come to wherever they're going. Partial migration happens more so when there's a very large migratory length that they could be going, and so sometimes some of these animals will stay behind. They're like, I'm not willing to make the journey, or they will go. Barn owls are one of these examples. Sometimes they will migrate and go whatever distance it is, but they have such a large range, sometimes they'll only go partially or stay put. So that is that. Altitudinal migration happens more so with like deer, which is what we see with deer, right? Where they're in the high mountains in the summer, eating grass, being in the rivers, and then when it gets colder, they're gonna come down into town and maybe be in your backyard, eating apples, that kind of situation. So as the weather changes, maybe it is easier for animals to come down to a lower altitude in order to have better weather or more resources. Removal is less obligatory. This would be like when there is a wildfire and animals are forced to migrate, or if there is an oil spill that pushes animals out of their natural habitat and they have to move in order to survive. So this is less natural, but that survival instinct is what's natural about it, and so they will push themselves into a new environment to attempt to adapt in order to make it. So, a few ways that animals do this, and sometimes it's just genetics. They just know that they need to make these journeys. Sometimes they're using mental maps. If you've ever seen anything about elephants, they have these mental maps and they'll follow the trails that their grandmothers walked for years and years and years, and families will follow the same trail. They have these mental maps. Instinct goes along with genetics. Some animals are going to be using the stars, like early navigating humans would have done, or the sun or the moon, its position in order to know that seasons are changing and that it's time to move. Some are able to use smell. This is very important, especially for mothers. This is how they keep track of their babies, especially when they're migrating, or just to know where they are, and how families can identify one another is based on their smell. Some animals are using magnetic fields and communication. They're following their family or land features, and this could be, for example, that maybe a certain animal walks to a certain land feature in their environment, or they're actually using it to navigate. For example, dolphins are using mountains on the ocean floor in order to kind of know their neighborhood and navigate through where they need to migrate. Or currents, which is what we see with sea turtles, following currents in the ocean. So there's a lot of ways that animals can migrate. And again, not all animals do migrate, but there are many ways that they can do it if that's part of their survival tactic. I want to tell you about one of my favorite animals' migratory journeys, the bar-headed goose. Geese for plural, okay? So this is what it looks like. It has two stripes right here on the side of its head, and their base location where they live is at sea level in India, and their migration goes over the Himalayas all the way into Central Asia, which is where they lay their eggs and have their breeding grounds, okay? And so this is an extreme climb to fly literally over the top of the Himalayas, so they have expanded capillaries in their bodies. They also have the largest lungs of any bird. And so they've been adapted to fly over this mountain, and they're fast. They're really, really fast. They can get all the way over the Himalayas, flying constantly in about 7 hours. So this is an extreme migratory practice that these geese go through so that they're able to get to those breeding grounds every single year and continue their species. But there are many different types of migrations. Some of the longest are the humpback whale. In the United States, some of our longest land animals are found even in Yellowstone, not so far away. So there's a lot of animals migrating. But we're gonna pop over to Marin for our activity to talk a little bit more about this. So thank you guys, and I'll see you soon.
All right, guys, so for our activity this week about migration, we are going to be using the hows that Sarah talked about. We're going to be coming up with ways that you can use some of these to create your own maps. Now there's actually two things I want you to do for an activity. You can pick one, you can do both multiple times, whatever you so desire. I want you to look up animals that migrate using these different things. So like look up genetic migration and look for animals that use their genetic instincts to migrate. Look up ones that go by smell and make a list of all the different animals that can do those things. The next thing that I want you to do is I want you to try and make your own maps using these things. So I want you to try and think of a way that you could make a map to a place, either somewhere that you know or somewhere that you can think of on the planet, or even if you want to try it with the stars out in space, go ahead and try that. Come up with your imagination of how you would navigate using some of these things. So like the sun, moon, and stars. So usually we tend to look at maps as something that we can visually look at. So something like land features. So go ahead and try making one with land features, and then try and make the same one with the sun, moon, and stars. Try another one where you just communicate to somebody what they need to do and see if they can follow your directions. Go ahead and try one with a magnetic field using a compass, something like that. You can also use ones using your various different senses. See what you observe while you're making your map and say you might see this, you might smell this, you might be able to touch this. So come up with some different senses that they might have to use while interacting with your map, and see if you can get somebody to follow your directions that you've come up with. So that's our activity for migration this week. We also are going to add a link to a website called the Utah Wildlife Migration Initiative. And you can see different Utah wildlife and how they have migrated through the last year. And I'll show you a time lapse of different points where they migrated to and from. So that's pretty cool. We're going to include that in the description. But until next week, have a great weekend and have a good time in the field, everybody.